All right, and welcome back to Gaining Momentum. You've obviously seen the title to this video. When I first heard the name Howard Schultz, I immediately thought of the cartoon The Peanuts, but apparently I had that wrong. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I loved this story, and I thought it was super inspirational, just a great example to everyone. And so it was really fun to hear someone's success story for a first time. And I hope it will energize you like how it energized me. I studied a few different things, but the one book that I really leaned on was Onward by Howard Schultz with Joan Gordon. It's really interesting. I have gotten a little bit spoiled with Walter Isaacson's writing, and so the timeline isn't perfect with this, how I would prefer it, but it was a really enjoyable read, and it felt fast. So I want to get started, though, talking about Howard Schultz. Let's just dive into this, okay? And I've got some notes right here, so maybe look in there. He was born in 1953, Brooklyn, New York. His dad had low-paying, unstable jobs. And one of the main things that really kind of framed his reality is that when Howard Schultz was 7 years old, his dad broke his ankle. I think it also mentioned something about his hip and something else that I read. But anyways, he lost his job, and he didn't have workers' compensation, benefits, short-term disability, long-term disability. It wasn't a thing for them. Who knows if it even existed. It says, that moment left a deep impression with Howard and shaped his belief of the importance of treating employees well. Okay, so I think that's an interesting kind of first step. So he realized from the get-go, like, this is not okay. I've seen how my family has struggled. And the thing that's interesting is that doesn't immediately lead to like, okay, here's this billion-dollar idea. I'll start the biggest coffee company that there is. But we can see how it kind of made him unique and made him who he is today. He was the first in his family to attend college. He got himself a scholarship to Northern Michigan University for a football scholarship. It was pretty cool. And he was working in sales after graduation, and he got hired from a small Seattle coffee shop called Starbucks. The thing that was really interesting, it wasn't what Starbucks is today. They were like a manufacturer. They sold beans. They sold some of like the presses and some of those things. And everyone knew it was just like high quality, good coffee stuff, but it wasn't like, sit down, here you can get whatever drink you want. It wasn't like that. But he got hired on and he was doing the marketing. So it talks about how he was able to go to Italy in 1983. And he said when he was in Italy, being able to go to some of these like small town Italian espresso bars, how one of the things that he mentions is going there and how like the barista just knew everyone, knew the order, knew how they like it, all these different things. And he said it was just so different than anything else. And rather than viewing coffee as just a drink or something, it was an experience. Which that was a really unique thing that kind of adds to him. It was the experience that changed him. It wasn't just a billion-dollar idea. I think that tells a lot about who Howard Schultz is. He comes back to Seattle and is telling the owners, like, hey, we need to do this. This is going to be amazing. If we have this kind of, create this kind of ambiance, this experience, it's going to change the world of coffee in the United States. And they didn't buy it. The owners just weren't interested. So it's really interesting, okay? And I'm going to read because I thought it was, it's worth reading. So I'll just say, when they declined, he took a massive risk by leaving the company and starting his own coffee shop. He called it Il Giornale. And the whole thing was just to kind of represent the experience that he had. And so he ended up kind of going into like, they talk about like being in business buildings and, you know, places where a lot of people were. And he was doing pretty well. And the thing that's really interesting, he says he faced rejection from 242 potential investors. Amazing. So eventually he had the opportunity to buy Starbucks. It was a small place. It just had a few shops. I believe that he ended up, I think the Starbucks at the time had 6 or it was 11. I don't know. Sorry, I should have remembered that. But they had a handful of locations, and he was like, okay, I need to buy this brand. and build out what I know that this could be. So he started looking for investors. You can imagine going to an investor saying, hey, got this great idea, this reputable brand I want to buy. We're going to change it so it's a little bit more of this, but everything's in line. He was rejected 242 times by different investors. But he didn't give up. So it says he was able to buy Starbucks, and he merged it with his existing coffee company, Il Giornale, and kept the name of Starbucks because it was reputable. Everyone knew it gave high quality coffee beans and all of this, but he gave the coffee experience from his new coffee shop, Il Giornale, amazing. So it grew from some very small Seattle-based coffee chain to the coffee brand. World known. At minimum 30,000 locations is what I've got down here. And they're opening new locations almost every day. It's incredible. One of the other things that was really interesting that I want to point out, he admittedly talks about how he was wrong with some of his focus and how he ended up having to shift back. It's really something that he highlights a lot in the book that I didn't see highlighted in a lot of other places. He was so focused on global growth, and apparently he was really trying to work in China and do a whole lot of things. And so he ended up being over kind of like the global expansion. And one of the things that's just wild is they realized, we're not doing well. We're not, our quality has gone down, the service, all of these things. We've got a lot of issues. And he had one CEO, and there's a whole thing. I really recommend reading the book Onward. And anyways, they ended up closing every Starbucks globally and training the employees. They said, we just got to close the stores to retrain the people. They talk about if you pour the espresso too slow, it comes out one way, and it needs to be just right so it's caramelly. And anyways, talks about all these details. You can tell the passion that he has for it. It's really interesting. He had to make a whole lot of choices. But there's a few things that really stand out to me about Howard Schultz. Number one, he was one of the first people to offer, as an employer, to offer health insurance for part-time employees. It was just totally unheard of. He did some fantastic, incredible things. He was able to do that. He saw how his father's injury affected his whole family, and he actually changed it. It's really cool. The other thing, again, another kind of experience-based example of his growth and his change, he created this Italian coffee experience in the States. He did it. It was about the experience. It wasn't just all about money. And he mentions how, he was so focused on money that the quality wasn't there, and he realized they had to change things. I so respect that. So interesting that even though he had had such success, he realized that he still had things he needed to work on. Really, really interesting. A couple of the things that I just wrote of his philosophy was resilience. Being rejected 242 times. And you imagine, if you've ever met with an investor, they're successful people. They have had absolute success in their niche. And so when you get told from someone that something's not going to work, from an investor, gosh, it's hard. But he did it. He had that vision. He stuck to it. He focused on the people, and he made it happen. It's just so exciting. One quote that I really thought was interesting that I hope that will stick with everyone is a quote from Howard Schultz. Dream more than others think practical. Expect more than others think possible. I love that. Such a beautiful quote. And I think, the more that we can do, the more that we can dream, and if we're passionate and willing to put in the work, we're going to be able to see the results. So amazing. So I'm so grateful that you're able to listen and enjoy this, and I hope that you'll catch another episode of the Gaining Momentum podcast, and have a great rest of your night. Let's talk again soon. Bye.